Welcome back to the Tobago Thursdays edition of the Now Morning Show. Our next conversation, we're moving to a global perspective, speaking about Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. Joining us is Rhonda Thompson-Benjamin, a counseling psychologist from Equilibrium Counselling Services. Good morning, Rhonda, and welcome.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here to discuss this very important topic.
It's a pleasure to have you back with us again. We appreciate it. Rhonda, this month we're observing suicide awareness. Why is it important and what impact does it have on communities?
Well, Suicide Awareness Month is crucial because it really helps to break the silence and stigma surrounding suicide and mental health struggles. In fact, the theme for this year is changing the narrative on suicide. So this theme really calls us to change those harmful myths, reduce stigma and to have to foster open, compassionate conversations about suicide. And when we have these conversations in the open, it normalizes that it's okay to seek help. At the community level, though, awareness campaigns could really encourage compassion, increase knowledge of available resources, and even empower people to really support others. Over time, the hope is that these collective efforts would reduce suicide rates, foster resilience, build safer and more supportive communities. So it's really important that we have these discussions.
It is, and one of the ways, of course, that we can break stigma is having the discussions, but also understanding. Can you share with us what some of the most common misconceptions are when it comes to suicide?
Well, one of the myths is that a suicide happens without warning. Now, in some cases, the warning signs are very subtle. So if you would have experienced a family member, friend, committing suicide, release the guilt. Sometimes it's very subtle. And if you don't have the information, if you don't know what signs to look for, you can miss it. So there are usually signs that we need to pay particular attention to. Another myth is that people who talk about suicide won't actually do it. So they're just looking for attention. Yes, sometimes they are looking for attention. It's a cry for help, and we should take all of these statements seriously. Another myth is that only persons with severe mental health issues think about suicide. Now, this is not true. Suicidal thoughts can occur in anyone experiencing an overwhelming, stressful experience like loss. And when we go through these overwhelming experiences, there can be that common feeling of helplessness and also hopelessness. So persons who are in chronic pain, they have chronic diseases, those are persons we have to check in on. We also have to pay particular attention to those persons who are experiencing grief, and the list goes on and on. Yeah, suicide is selfish. That is another myth that we hold dear to. And we are thinking about that from our perspective. But the person who is having suicidal ideation or suicidal thoughts, in truth, they attempt or they may think about suicide because of that psychological pain. It's unbearable. And most times they believe that their loved ones would be better off without them. So they think that they are actually doing their loved ones a favor. So these are some of the myths, and there are many more that we can discuss, but it's important for us to get the information so that we can dispel these myths in our own lives and in our communities.
One of the myths that you just spoke of is something that you hear a lot, which is, people who speak about it are not actually going to do it, very much with the cry wolf scenario. But unfortunately, in these times, we see, as you said, this is a myth and it is something that does happen. So what early warning signs should we be looking out for?
Great question. Anytime you see someone around you expressing hopelessness or feeling like a burden, that should that should be an indicator that there is something happening and I need to support this person. So they may say things like, you know what, nobody cares about me. I feel like I'm not working and I'm not contributing anything to the household. I can't help my family. Those are things that we have to pay attention to. Withdrawing from family, friends, and, activities that they once enjoyed. So this person, would usually go out to the gym, they have a lot of activities happening, and that you see that they withdraw from everything. This is something that may also be a warning sign. There are dramatic changes in mood, and especially when it relates to suicide, we have to look at the sudden calmness that comes after deep despair. So all the time this person was expressing or experiencing symptoms of depression, and all of a sudden they seem so calm, and we can be tricked into believing that, okay, this person is getting over this experience, but many times they have just come to terms with their thoughts, and sometimes they actually have a plan to take their lives. So they are calm. You may see them giving away their possessions, saying goodbye in unusual ways. So all of a sudden, this person says, I have the car here. Take the car. Or I have this set of jewelry here. Take this jewelry. We have to be able to be so aware that when these things happen, we could ask questions and support person. Another one that I just want to mention is the increased use of alcohol and drugs, and also risky behavior. So with knowing the warning signs, we can identify, and then we would be able to assist.
Now, Rhonda, what should we do if we suspect that somebody, a friend or family member, is contemplating suicide?
Yeah. First of all, I want to admit, I want to say openly that it can be very nerve-wracking. It could be a very, anxiety triggering experience to see your loved one in such distress. However, what we can do is to ask directly and compassionately. So, are you thinking about suicide? Now, some people believe, and this is another myth, if I ask you, if I ask you the question, it increases the risk. But research shows us that asking the question does not increase the risk. Most times, if they are having those thoughts, you cannot influence whether or not, the question will influence their behavior. So ask the question directly. Once you have the information, then you would know what to do next. So listen without judgment. Let them share their feelings fully. Sometimes they just want to feel heard and understood. Sometimes we are thinking, okay, what to do next? And again, it could create that environment where the person feels even more unsafe because this person is out of control. I am out of control. And that is not what we want. So listen without judgment, validate their pain, and avoid minimizing it. So let's say, for example, someone would have experienced grief. This is a year later and they are still having thoughts of suicide. You may be tempted to say, but it's a year ago. That happened so long ago, Gail. What is wrong with you? Or what is wrong with you, sir? But we need to validate their pain because it is very real in their experience. Stay connected. So don't leave them alone if they are in immediate danger. So if you ask the question directly and compassionately and they say, yes, I am thinking about suicide, and you ask, do you have a plan right now? And they may say, yes, this is what I plan to do. Then you need to stay connected. Do not leave them. Let them speak, but also encourage professional help. So you may suggest seeing a therapist or a counselor, or calling emergency services or a crisis hotline. Sometimes we want to say, oh, this is so overwhelming for me. I just want to leave this space. But in these moments, persons really, really need your support.
Now, Rhonda, in light of that situation, right, one of the things that does come to mind is sometimes people will have a plan. And when you ask them directly, they either evade the question or do not tell the truth. In a situation like that, how do you recommend an individual treats with it?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Now, again, you professionals are trained to make those assessments. And there are signs, there are things that we might miss as the average person. So again, it's about releasing that guilt. However, when we again create that safe environment, that person would be more open to share. So when we engage in empathy, how are you really feeling? Ensuring that it doesn't come from a place of judgment and, lecturing and offering those quick fixes. You know what? God will take care of this. Sometimes the person knows that, but in this moment, they are extremely stressed. So again, stay calm and grounded, create that environment. And if you suspect that this person is in immediate danger, you should call emergency services. Sometimes when they reveal, they say, I'm telling you, but I don't want you to tell anybody else, especially in cases where they are in imminent danger. You should call, let them know I love you. And you mightn't understand it right now, but this is how I feel like I have to support you.
And Rhonda, another point that you would have referenced is listening without judgment. How can individuals approach these conversations without bringing across that judgment and making somebody feel overwhelmed?
Yeah. So, as I would have mentioned before, avoid lecturing, listen to understand. You don't have to solve all the problems. Sometimes, you feel as though, all right, they mention grief. All right, what could I say about grief? They mention, maybe a difficult situation in their family, like life, like divorce, and you feel as though you have to say everything right. The goal is to listen. Again, respect their pace. Allow them to share as much or as little as they are ready to. And when they find that you respect their pace, they would be inclined to share more. Show genuine care. Sometimes just knowing that someone is willing to sit and to listen could be life changing for somebody who is experiencing suicidal ideation. Yes. So it's about understanding that person, understanding that your role, which is not to fix, but to listen. And again, that opens the door to encourage them to seek that professional help.
Many times we see that some have a brick wall up when it comes to actually getting that professional help. So it can take a while. What recommendations would you have
Yes.
for somebody who is dealing with somebody going through that situation?
Yeah. What I would say is again, go at their pace. Once they are not in a crisis where they actively have a plan, go work with their pace. Sometimes you may want to sit with them or make the appointment for them. So how could I support you? Do you want me to go with you at the first session? Could we sit and call the crisis hotline together? If it becomes too overwhelming, I can support you. So ensuring that that person, because that could be a very scary thing to reach out for help when you feel as though it's a helpless situation. So just sitting with them, supporting them through in terms of seeking professional help, that could be new world in these situations.
Let's talk about the role of the mental health professional in suicide prevention. What role is played?
So the mental health professional, their responsibility is to provide a safe, confidential space for the individual to really process their overwhelming emotions. So they may assess suicide risk and really help that person to come up with what we call a safety plan. So if these feelings come around, what is the first step? What is the second step? And sometimes, as a family member or friend, you may not be able to provide that intensive care and intervention. So this is why helping them to really seek professional help, it truly truly matters. They help in terms of crisis intervention for acute episodes, and they really collaborate with communities, families, schools, and workplaces to educate and to really advocate for persons like this. And, I would just want to, provide persons with these professional hotlines. So in Tobago, there is 211 that you can call if you feel as though you are in crisis or your family member or friend is in crisis. And there is the national hotline, which is 800 COPE.
Thank you so much for that, Rhonda. Rhonda, we just have shy of a few minutes left too specifically. Just want to touch on the other side of it, which is being that friend who is that confidant. When you have somebody who may be coming to you repeatedly with the same thought process and confiding in you, when do you take that space yourself to be able to step back? Because it can be a lot for the other individual.
Yes, that is so true. So you as the person who is providing support, sometimes you may need counseling because sometimes it comes with a lot of guilt. Am I doing the right thing? And it can indeed take an emotional toll on you. If you are a family member, you may not be able to evade the situation. Let's say you live with the person. It becomes difficult to emotionally detach. But in these cases, you seek professional help for yourself. Encourage the person to seek their professional help because when they engage in active intervention in terms of professional services, you might be able to, that burden is somehow partially transferred. So the conversations that they would usually have with you, they can't have with their therapist, they can't have with their mental health practitioner. So it's about being able to guide that person so that you can maintain your mental health. That is very important as well.
And Rhonda, as we close the conversation, can you kindly repeat those numbers for those who may need it?
Sure. So in Tobago, there is our emergency support center. There are trained professionals ready to assist. So that number is 211. And the national hotline of suicide prevention is 800 COPE. So that's 800-2673.
Rhonda, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Rhonda Thompson-Benjamin, counseling psychologist from Equilibrium Counseling Services, joining us this morning as we put some focus on Suicide Awareness Month. Stay tuned. There's more coming up after this break.
Wrong from right. Tell me where